right. Welcome all in for another episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. It has been a few weeks. We've both been on vacation. We both got to get some rest, some recuperation. We're back, and obviously a lot has actually happened since the last time we recorded. We have put out at least some of the big news out on social, so we've been keeping up. And of course, that big news is that Herb Sendek was extended at Santa Clara. We'll get into that. We'll also talk about some of the non-conference schedules that have been released. That we're starting to see some of the preseason rankings come out, some predictions on awards here and there. But we're going to start with the big news, and that is, of course, that Santa Clara has extended Herb Sendek through 2030. This is obviously big news for the program and the direction that they are headed. Thomas, what was your gut reaction? And now that you've had some time to kind of sit on it, where are you kind of with the news of Herb staying put down in Santa Clara?
My first reaction was Santa Clara is betting on themselves to continue that incremental improvement. And what I mean by that is at the start of the Herb Sendek tenure, Santa Clara is not where it needed to be, but it took some time to grow. You think of those now, what was few and far between 20-win seasons is now commonplace. And now people are looking for that next step. You think of those times they beat St. Mary's in the 21-22 season. You think of the time they beat Gonzaga in the 22-23 season. Go on the road last year and then beat the Bulldogs there. So many little things have taken place. And now the athletic department taking another bet on Herb Sendek to say, okay, you can take those next few steps and not only be consistently in the NIT, but also be in the dance eventually, whether it be at large, whether it be WCC tournament champions. You're going to be the guy that helps lead us there, regardless of what the outside noise may be. And they're doubling down on that stability. And I think for now, I'm in the boat of, I agree with it. It makes sense. And because you always run into the question of, okay, well, if you demand better, who is better? And you run the risk of sliding back to what Santa Clara once was towards the end of the Kerry Keating era. So I think right now it's a worthwhile bet to invest in, but that doesn't mean that this coaching staff and Herb himself is going to rest on his laurels, that he has to improve, the coaching staff has to improve. Everybody's improving across the board in the WCC. So if Santa Clara doesn't get with the times, they will also get left in the mid-pack, and we know that's not where they want to be.
Right. And I think that's always the thing. I mean, so many times we as fans, we as alums can get so caught up in the what we could do more as opposed to also looking back of where we've been, because sometimes we get so caught up of some of the success, the trending, and that it hasn't been quote unquote good enough to this point, or they haven't really succeeded or whatever else. I mean, there's so often, like, I hear from St. Mary's people that it's like, oh, Randy Bennett's hit a ceiling. He can only go so far. It's like, you remember what it was like before Randy Bennett? It's like, you sometimes need to pause, because the grass is not always greener on the other side if you go down another coaching route or whatever else. And Herb has had the most success of a Santa Clara coach really in the last, like, say 30 years. Probably you have to go all the way back to Dick Davey when you're talking about success with the Santa Clara program. And the talent has gotten better. The support of the program has gotten better. Obviously, the biggest hiccup, the biggest thing that everyone points to is that they haven't gotten to the NCAA tournament. And you can say that that's fair, considering the amount of talent has been on this team the last, say, 4 or 5 years. There's definitely the case to be made that they could have been on the bubble or been in twice, I would say, legitimately, like in the last 5 years. And those tough losses, the losses that I'm sure we all can point to, like, they shouldn't have lost this game, they shouldn't have lost that game, is frustrating beyond belief. And that is also, I mean, I think about that's also what St. Mary's was doing. Let's wind it back a decade. That's what was happening to them. They would lose the inexplicable game that they should not lose. Like, I remember the random losses to San Diego, the random losses to Pepperdine. It's like, what is this team doing? They should not be doing this. And that's kind of where Santa Clara is right now. The talent's there, the direction is there. And yes, it does look like that they are betting on the success that they have had with Herb to this point. This season, I think, is going to be a good testing ground to see, as this is kind of the first time we've seen this team be near gutted all the way through, and going to have to rebuild this team from scratch. So outside of say like Mahi and Napper, this is going to be a brand new team. It's not. I think the expectations should be kind of quelled a bit going into this year, but this is. It looks like that they're banking on the successes they've had, the direction that they've had, and the fact that you can point to a Jalen Williams, you can point to a Brandon Pajemski as like the top of that success. The next part is breaking through and getting to the NCAA tournament. Now, and maybe this all changes as we get into next season. No more Gonzaga, no more Washington State, no more Oregon State. And I know some WCC fans are thinking, oh, this could be the opening. This could be the door to actually get to the NCAA tournament, because now it's you only have to get by St. Mary's. You don't have to get by St. Mary's and Gonzaga to get in. So I think it was a good move. I don't think there was really anything that Santa Clara could do other than this. Like I don't see where they were going to go if they didn't re-up with Herb. And finding young coaches is hard because sometimes, like, if they have any level of success, they may not stick around for very long. Especially if you're at a mid-major program in a conference like the WCC. It's those successful guys. Look at Todd Golden as a prime example, maybe extreme example because he's now a national champion, but that's what you're looking at. So when you have coaches who've had a lot of success, who have had elite talent, who have gotten to the tournament, you do have to bank on that success, and I do think we're seeing that, at least in this in this second stage of what we're going to see with Herb Sendek at Santa Clara.
And I'm going to dissect a lot of your points into little different bits here. So to start with the comparison to Randy Bennett, there are a lot. Ask yourself the rhetorical question. Be careful what you ask for because you just might get it. I mean, I can think of many WCC fan bases and beyond that would love to have Randy Bennett roaming their sideline, having even a threat to get into the NCAA tournament every year. Like, you want that. You live for that. You dig for that. I've had Santa Clara people say, man, once Bennett's gone, this is ours. Like, he is a mainstay for numerous reasons, and one of the guys that will obviously go in the St. Mary's and WCC Hall of Honor when it's all said and done. Secondly, when you look at the fact of, I think it's mutually exclusive things, like you mentioned, Santa Clara doing well, but also not getting to the dance. You have talent like Jalen Williams, you have talent like Brandon Pajemski, and combine that, you don't get a single like NIT win. It's kind of a tough pill to swallow when you kind of reflect back and you see this is what the era confided in. And this year, like you mentioned, the team is gutted this year, and I would argue is kind of rebuilt in the image of trying to find another Brandon Pajemski. You have all these transfers coming in from the Big Ten who didn't play that much, trying to find a way to strike while the iron's hot. And if they do that, they may be back on the bubble. Because I'm of the opinion, and some people may disagree with this, the 21-22 Santa Clara team, if Josip Vrankic does not miss a month in December, is going to the NCAA tournament. I will take that to my grave. They had a bad loss against USF in the last month of the season that kind of put the nail in the coffin. But that, for me, for my money, that was the best Santa Clara team I've seen in recent memory. And even over these last few years with more teams that have more wins, you just knew. If you watched that team, you just knew they had a little bit of sauce to them. So that's kind of like my opinion. They're mutually exclusive things. And there should be no reason to say, oh, yeah, I just want the NIT. Nowadays, no. NCAA tournaments, and NCAA tournaments, and most importantly, the 68-team NCAA tournament, okay? We're not here to, not that it's a participation trophy if it was the 76-team version, but you want to feel like you've earned it every step of the way through every single heartache, through every single fork in the road, and through every single person that said you couldn't. So that's kind of how I view it with the way Santa Clara has extended Herb Sendek. The goal's still out there, and the goal still needs to be attained, and I don't think anybody is going to let them off the hook if they don't.
Right. I think there's still the expectations are high, and like a contract extension like this does say that the school has the confidence in you, does say that the athletic department has the confidence in you. Obviously, the administration has the confidence in you. This is one of those things where it's okay. You've now proven that you can get to this level. Now you have to take it to the next level, and Now, the one thing I think that there's at least some level of commonality here, like you think about just like the coaches on the WCC, like there is an age thing here of like Herb, like Sendek, Bennett, Few are all kind of right there with each other age wise. So there is at least a little bit of a clock on, I think, all of them on how long this is going to last. And so there's at least a little bit of the sooner rather than later for Santa Clara to be able to break through and be able to get the success that they can while Herb is still down in the South Bay.
Yeah, it's a fair statement. I mean, you want to avoid these bad losses. Like the Pajimski team lost to Pacific at home and they lost to Portland on the road. And you look at how close they were with over 20 wins. That's not going to help your case in any aspect whatsoever. So those, like in Jalen Williams' case, they lost to admittedly very good UC Irvine team, but then also lost to Cal and Mark Fox. So I mean, it's just not going to fly. Those small things cannot fly. And you mentioned St. Mary's a decade ago. Now this year, these past few years, they take care of business pretty much every single time. And they're not under threat of missing the bubble, even if they don't win the WCC tournament. So I think you look at that, Santa Clara's sense of consistent stability on its floor, I think is going to be even better than what its ceiling can be, because that's going to pay more dividends when people are looking at your resume.
Yeah, and the last few years, Santa Clara has done a really good job of putting together the schedule that gives them the opportunities to get into that conversation. There was, I mean, even as we got into mid WCC play, as Santa Clara ripped off the wins against Oregon State and Gonzaga, it's like they started to come back into the conversation despite all of the early losses. Now it was very small, but everyone could see that the talent was there and that this was a tournament capable or tournament quality level of talent on this squad. So that has never been in question, but they have to be able to shore up those bad losses to make sure that those don't happen. USF has been able to do that, but they don't get the big wins. Gonzaga, we know, takes care of business. St. Mary's takes care of business. And that's what you have to do to be able to get to that next level. It's you got to get the big wins, but you got to take care of all the games you should as well. All right. So now one thing, again, mentioned the schedule, and Santa Clara does have Xavier on the schedule this coming year, which is going to be a big matchup for them. Xavier is always going to be a tough team, Sean Miller or not. It's going to be a tough team on that schedule. But a number of teams have also released their non-conference schedules. San Diego, LMU, and Pacific have all released their non-conference schedules in the last couple weeks. I'm going to go through at least briefly each one of them because all of them really have kind of shown that they might be up to something good here. And as my graphics is not as great as I thought it was, Pacific is one of the first ones we're going to take a look at because this one honestly is pretty balanced. Now there's some definite not great games like Simpson and Life Pacific being on here. It's like, what is going on here? But Nevada, Florida Atlantic, you look at having BYU on that schedule. This is like Pacific is in a position where they're still trying to gain legitimacy, gain some sort of identity, whatnot. But it feels like this is a schedule that's going to give them great opportunities, but also enough opportunity to pick up some early wins before they get into conference play.
I like the balance of Pacific's schedule because you want to punch up and find out who you are. And you look at last year, they had opportunities like at Colorado, at Arkansas. You want to find ways to figure out who you are early because it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. You can't play Life Pacific 32 times a year. And I look at the schedule right here. You mentioned it already, Nevada, BYU. I look at that Florida Atlanta game like that's a team that's not far removed from doing very many good things out on the basketball floor. And lest we forget what happened the last time Pacific played at Haas Pavilion against Cal. They won. I'm pretty sure that was a Leonard Perry-led team when they won at Cal. And that was the same team that lost by a million points against Pepperdine in the first round of the WCC tournament. So we cannot forget this. Like, that's a team that they have proven that they can beat. And, you know, if you're a Cal fan on the other side, you're looking like, all right, I don't want to talk about that no more. But Pacific, they have a real shot to be in the mid-tier of the WCC this year. You look at the way Dave Smart's coaching history speaks for itself. We've mentioned it for months on end over the past year or so. Pacific can find a way here. They can find a way. You still have Elias Ralph out there. There's a path to success here. I think it's just a matter of not letting those big runs swallow you up. That's the one thing I saw that Pacific would sometimes fall into the trap of, like a team would rip off a 12-0 run, and sometimes the offense get really stuck in neutral. Pacific can find a way to alleviate those stretches of bad offense, but then also find a way to punch above its weight there. I think they can make some noise. And you're not looking here to say they're going to be an at-large or anything like that. But if we can find a way to maybe be in the CBI, I'd say that's a successful season.
Yeah, like this specific team, like you mentioned Dave Smart and just the work he's done, obviously over the course of his career, but even in year one at Pacific, that was a lot more of that was a respectable team last year. Like you could not actually overlook Pacific. You saw what I mean, they beat Washington State twice. So you mentioned the Colorado game that they were in for a long period of time before the Buffs were able to pull away. Like this Pacific squad is going to, I think they have more talent than they did a year ago. I think they're going to be much improved from a year ago. Now, I don't know if that necessarily means they break into the middle of the pack. I don't know if they where that necessarily puts them. I don't know if that gets them the seventh, it gets them the sixth. I mean, because of the work that a lot of the teams have done, like they could still end up being ninth, 10th, or 11th in this league just because of the work other teams have done. But Pacific is going to be a tough out for a lot of WCC teams. The balance of the schedule, I think they get some good opportunities to pick up wins early. I mean, like looking at the Stony Brooks or the Cal State Fullertons, Sac State, like those are games that are very realistic wins for them. Air Force was not a very good team a year ago, and that's another one they could get. Cal, who knows? Like now, that is a way that's at Cal, and that's going to. I think the fact that it's later in the non-conference does suit Pacific well. BYU, I mean that that's just going to be a tough road, I think, for Pacific, especially this year's version of BYU, which is supposed to be probably one of the favorites in the Big 12 and going to be a very popular pick once we get to March. So I think this balances out well. Pacific is going to do a lot of good things, but it's going to be just a big challenge for them as they kind of to figure out who they are early on in this one, because they will have those spats of falling backward. Can they be tough enough? Do they score enough? Last year, they just could not score enough. And that was one of their biggest problems amongst the other issues that they did have. But I think they have a little bit more offense. They should be a tougher out going into this year.
I think fans should appreciate the kind of the challenge that Pacific gave themselves out here. And, compared to some other teams that we're going to preview here, I would argue they're punching above their weight more than some others are. So I think you look at Pacific, you're like, okay, some things can happen here, and they'll find a way to, if you can steal some of these games, like you mentioned, they may still end up like ninth in the WCC, but I think you still get a very respectable squad that can find a way to make things happen and eventually be the thorn in the side as Washington State experienced a season ago.
Absolutely. Now we talked about like maybe schedules that don't leave a little less to the imagination on it, but for a team that does seem like it's talent-wise is going to be much better than it was a year ago, and that's San Diego. I mean, this San Diego squad, a lot of people are cautiously optimistic about this team. This is going to be a lot more of this is going to be a much older team than we saw a year ago. The last couple of years, we've seen Steve Lavin really switch up the mentality of what he's gone after. We saw a lot of freshmen get big minutes the last couple of years, and that I don't think we're going to see that in this season. We're going to see a lot more of San Diego with veteran players, and now the schedule, not the best. Like you do see UC San Diego, Washington toward the end, but Cal Baptist, San Jose State, Grambling, the Idahos, it's not. This one is one where they could rattle off 10 wins. I think fairly easily in the non-conference, but I don't know if they're going to get a big challenge until we see them see their crosstown rival in UC San Diego or head up to Washington.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of took some of the words out of my mouth there. Like they win 10 games in this non-conference schedule. I don't feel like I've learned a whole lot about this team. Like chances are you could have a very close game against UC San Diego or Washington, but you look at the rest of the teams, and I know Cal Baptist put up a nice fight in the WAC last year, and we're pretty respectable in the Acrisure series games. Like they're going to face each other in this time. It's like you want to convince yourself that something can work here, but I just don't see this as enough of a challenge for what San Diego wants to be, because you pad your resume as if I don't believe San Diego is going to be challenging for postseason basketball this year. But you want to, pad your resume, tell yourself you look good after a non-conference schedule like this. I just don't know how much legitimacy we're going to be able to put on this come conference play. If you, so to speak, you play Oregon State opening night and you lose by 30 in Gill, it's like, what did we really learn about ourselves here? And I'm just not 100% convinced that San Diego is going to get not what they want, but what they need to find out about themselves.
Yeah, it's like that. So I like your initial point, like, yeah, I don't think we're going to learn too much about San Diego until we see those last two games, the two away games, with UC San Diego and Washington. Like, until we see those matchups, I don't know if I'm going to know who this squad is, and they might have those growing pains early on in WCC play. Now, obviously, that's going to depend on who they see early on in WCC play, and if they get to 10 wins, I think that gives them a level of confidence that, yeah, they should still be able to take care of business against a lot of the teams at the bottom of the WCC, or what we predict to be the bottom, like the Portland, Pepperdine. I think it's going to be a challenge with Pacific. It's going to be a challenge with Seattle. It's going to be a challenge with the likes of Washington State. Like, I don't see San Diego being that separated from that group. I think that we're going to see a lot of ups and downs as we go through WCC play, because I just don't think they will have challenged themselves enough to learn about themselves throughout the course of the non-conference.
Yeah, I mean, I think adversity is the best teacher. I don't think if you run yourself on a 12-2 cupcake non-conference, and I'm not saying that to insult San Diego's non-conference schedule that's on the screen right now. I'm just saying in general, you have a 12-2 cupcake non-conference schedule, and then you walk into your conference. Like, I think of someone who grew up in the Bay Area, and Zach, I don't mean to open these old wounds, but some of the old St. Mary's non-conference schedules, you ended up having a good season through the WCC, then you get to the dance, you get left out, and you're like, well, what just happened? Like, I'm 27-5, something around that, and I'm not going to the postseason. I think of something similar for San Diego. You want to prove that you're the 6th, 7th, or 8th best team here in the WCC. You got to find ways to either sustain a punch in the mouth, go take a bye game somewhere else. Kind of like Washington wasn't a good enough team for me to say, that's a team that is on the rise. I still think they have a ton of questions that need to be answered. You see San Diego's resetting. You see Riverside's resetting. You look at this schedule last year, I'd say you'd get a little bit more, fortuitous analysis, for lack of a better phrase. This year, I think it's more along the lines of, it's here, it's there. We just could have been a little bit better.
Yeah. I mean, I think about even 2 years ago, San Diego's schedule was, San Diego's non-conference schedules have really not been all that great the last few years. Now, of course, the teams also haven't been all that great the last couple of years, but I think back to Steve Lavin's first year, where it was like, I learned nothing about this team until they played Arizona State late in non-conference and they pulled off a win. And I was like, oh, now I know something, like, this team can actually get some of these games. And so in a sneaky way, they gained enough confidence early on to be able to overcome Arizona State. And that was a team that ended up finishing, I think they were 6th in the WCC that year. So that they ended up being the surprise team. They ended up being a lot better than a lot of us thought they would be. So, maybe that's what we're going to see again this year. Now, I think the schedule, unfortunately, just does not lend itself to, you mentioned, postseason basketball and having a good enough resume to be able to pull that off. But it could give them enough confidence that they're going to then take that momentum into conference play and be able to do some damage, at least early on, before they start to kind of hit those, like, the top teams, whether that be USF, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, as now Penn, because I think, what was it, LMU last year had the rough first 6 games where they played them all right at the start of the conference play.
Yeah, and I think one of the last things I do want to get across about San Diego here is, kind of like last year, they lose to Ryder right out of the gate, and you're like, oh man, like, where's bottom? Because I think we already found it after one game. You look at these first 4 or 5 games, you're like, okay, if San Diego's not 4-1, I'm raising some eyebrows. I'm not sounding the alarms, but 4-1 is very much attainable with those first few games, and you definitely do not want to drop any of the first 3. You get to those first 3 and you're like, San Diego's like 1-2 after it, then I'd be concerned for what the character of the team will be going forward, especially when you run into teams that will want to pound you in the face.
Yeah, looking at those first 5 games all at home, like that, it does feel very much like that should be 4-1 3-2 is at worst for those first 5 before they hit the road and get Cal Baptist. But San Diego's going to be an interesting watch. I mean, the team I think is going to be, they're talented. They're going to be fun. I think it's going to be not until later that we know who this team really is.
Yeah, we'll find out if they're going to be the team that's a thorn in the side of everybody else, or if they're just another team that everyone looks forward to facing over in the Slim Jim.
Well, now speaking of teams that are probably going to be a thorn in the side of a lot of people, it's going to be LMU. And this is a team that at least 2 of the last 3 years have been one of those squads that we know that they are wildly capable. The talent is on this team. We have seen Stan Johnson put together some very talented squads. They just have not had really the non-conference schedule that kind of matched or challenged it enough, in my opinion. Now, he and I had a conversation about this in the offseason last year about just the challenge that there is for especially teams in LMU's position, that they're not quite the USF Santa Clara's at that level, but they're also the level above the San Diegos, the Pepperdines, the Pacifics. And how the challenge that is the schedule in that window, because the better teams don't really want to play you because you might be good enough to beat them, but you don't want to schedule too many of the bad teams below you because it does nothing for you. So it's always a challenge, I think, for LMU. But there are a couple of interesting matchups on here. Obviously, like we see some of them on the screen. What jumped out at you in this when you saw the schedule for the first time?
I think the stretch starting with UC Santa Barbara through UC San Diego, that's like the meat of the schedule. I know you see a game against Stony Brook in there, but I think in general, I'm glad that you brought up that juxtaposition of talking with Stan Johnson about that, because I might kind of lean into some of those problems right now, because when you look at LMU, they're not looking to sit there and be 6th in the WCC. They're not looking there to be, thrown in the CBI in the last second. They want to go to the NIT. They want to go to the NCAA tournament. And I'm not wholly convinced that this does enough, not only for them, but the teams playing them. It's like if USF or Santa Clara has an at-large case and they see LMU on the last day of the regular season, I'm not sure that this non-conference schedule, compounded with whatever they do in WCC play, is going to do enough for a team to say, okay, we're going to go kick out another Power 4 team and move in another WCC team. So I think this schedule not only isn't necessarily the best challenge that LMU could have put on for themselves, but I think it also may affect some other WCC teams who cannot afford a loss to a team like LMU with this schedule.
I mean, we can even talk about how Santa Clara losing at LMU last year.
Thanks.
As a prime example.
Appreciate
Oregon State doing the same thing. Now, LMU has defended the home court really well. At least they did last year. You think about, they beat Santa Clara in that building. They beat Oregon State in that building. They really pushed St. Mary's in that building. So it's not, we know that they have a formula that has success. And one of the challenges for LMU has been the consistent success. LMU has not had consistent winning records since the early 90s, which just sounds, considering how much talent has been on LMU teams over the course of the last even 20 years, it just seems wild that they have not had back-to-back winning seasons in that long. But that is where we are right now, and they could break through that this year. The schedule, I think, does lend itself to help them out before they get the WCC play. The window between Santa Barbara and UC San Diego, yeah, that's their key spot. Like, they have to be able to get through that. I'm not saying they obviously have to win everything, but I think this is a squad that's capable of it. I mean, UC San Diego is coming off of obviously a banner year, but they are going to be rebuilding. St. Louis, second year under their new head coach, that's going to be an interesting team as well. UC Santa Barbara, Aiden Mahaney's new home, and so there's going to be some familiarity with Santa Barbara and what they're going to bring, and that being out in Santa Barbara is also going to be that interesting matchup as well. Heading down to the Sunshine Slam as well. They don't have the matchups for that one quite yet, but this is LMU. In my head, I'm looking at this schedule, I could see them winning 10, 11 games, but I could also see them end up winning 6 or 7 because of what we have seen from LMU over the last few years.
Uh, when you look at LMU's non-conference schedule, I think success with this can turn itself into something better. So you mentioned Stan Johnson's challenges with not being good enough to schedule to help an at-large, but also being somewhat good enough to help be a thorn in your side on any given day. If LMU does not trip over themselves and have a bad start, or in any case, drop a game they shouldn't, you graduate yourself to the next tier of LMU being a team that people want. I don't know if want to schedule is the right word to say, but you have a team that's someone says, okay, I think you're worth the soul. I think you're someone that can help us. I think LMU would say, okay, another team like St. Louis. If you can have a team like St. Louis, you have VCU down the line, Dayton, whatever it is. I think success with this non-conference schedule graduates yourself into the next tier of opponents who are willing to schedule you, and then where LMU is like, okay, we can make some noise for our own brand at the same time when you look at the schedules of like Santa Clara or these past few seasons.
LMU is one of the, it's like, I always think about this LMU squad because it's like they are kind of one of the more frustrating teams because we've seen the amount of talent that this squad has had. And we've seen them, the 3-4 years ago now is when they became the first team to beat Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and BYU all in the same year. this they know what they are wildly capable of being one of the better teams in the WCC. A lot of times they just run into themselves. And now I would say like they haven't been able to score enough over the last few years. I think that's been one of their chief problems, is finding those consistent scorers. Sometimes you just have guys who maybe didn't quite bring what you thought they would bring. Other times it's just, I mean, they have been so devastated by injury some of these seasons that it's like they can never even get really out of the gate because of that. But if this team can stay healthy, this is a schedule that they can get to 10 wins, I think, pretty easily if everything goes their way. But if they get banged up early, if they end up in trouble, this could not snowball on them, but there could be some games in here where they don't pick up those wins. Like St. Louis, San Diego, Santa Barbara are 3 that could very easily be L's on this schedule, not counting what happens at the Sunshine Slam. But everything else, I mean, they should. I mean, even Eastern Washington, like that's no pushover. Like Eastern Washington knows what they're doing. So
yeah, I think to wrap up my own perspective on this, at least, is LMU fans are waiting for that next step. You think of Santa Clara fans 4 years ago as my direct comparison. USF fans of 4 or 5 years ago, they're looking for that next step. LMU fans, not that the clock is ticking on Stan Johnson immediately, so to speak, but there needs to be tangible improvement, and people need to see it. It can't just be another year where you're hovering over 500 and you upset 1 or 2 teams, but then you blow another 1 or 2 games that you're supposed to win. LMU needs to find a way to put it all together. That's the next step. That's the one they have to take. When you have this non-conference schedule in front of you, there's opportunity. They just have to go take it.
Yeah. And with LMU, like we'll see how this ends up going. Yeah, I think this is still, I could see like realistically probably 9 wins is an realistic number to look at in that non-conference schedule. San Diego is going to be an interesting one. Pacific, I think, has a lot of great opportunities there to see who they really are. But we have only a few of the non-conference schedules. We're slowly starting to see the others trickle out. We're starting to see some of the tournament brackets as well. Now, I think 2 of them, the Maui and the Battle for Atlantis, both announced their brackets. Washington State is taking part in the Maui. St. Mary's is taking part in the Battle for Atlantis. And while these 2 tournaments are normally some of the marquee matchups, the economics of college basketball has kind of put a little bit of a damper, I think, on the fields in these 2 tournaments. I mean, the Battle for Atlantis, which was supposed to, I think, have initially had some really good teams, St. Mary's included, but now you're looking at the likes of their first matchup is Wichita State. Then you look, it's VCU, Vanderbilt, Western Kentucky, South Florida, Colorado State, Virginia Tech. Like it's not a bad field, but it's also not one that like jumps out at you as seeing like marquee matchups up and down this field. And like I talking with some just St. Mary's folks of like this initiative was a tournament we were excited about being a part of, going to Atlantis, all that sort of stuff. And then we see the field and it's like, oh, not as exciting anymore.
Yeah, I wonder if it'll be the St. Mary's fans' own justification and be like, okay, Randy, understand why most of these past few years we've been in the Bay for a long time. We're not going to go need our passports every now and then now after this Battle for Atlantis tournament. But I think the big thing that you were talking about, and I'm in agreement with, is both with the Maui Invitational and both with the Battle for Atlantis, through no fault of their own, to be clear, the field is a significant step down. You have on the regular big time SEC teams, Big 10 teams, Big 12 teams fighting each other. Like Gonzaga was in this tournament last year and they were fighting for their lives. It hurts the resumes when you look at it to start, but it doesn't necessarily make you want to gravitate towards those tournaments in terms of spending your dollars. Like you mentioned, I don't know if St. Mary's fans can justify to themselves going to the Battle for Atlantis now. Washington State, are they going to justify going to Maui? Although that may be its own unique circumstance, considering what there is in Hawaii outside of the fact. But I think in general, they're not going to get what they believe they signed up for. I think that's just there's really, to me, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You wanted to strike gold and you maybe got some bronze. That's really, to me, how it is.
Now the Maui's not completely at least you still have Texas in that tournament. You still have Boise State, a couple of teams that obviously are teams that every year in it. NC State, I know a lot of people are actually kind of bullish on them going into this year, so that's another one. But Washington State is starting with Chaminade.
Well,
so their first one really isn't going to move the needle at all for them. And then they'll play either Arizona State or Texas. USC and Seton Hall are also in this tournament. It's not quite like, especially last year, when you think of this past year's Maui, which was an unbelievable field. This one just leaves a lot to be desired. And that's the biggest problem, I think, as you mentioned, like just the economics, the challenges of no fault of these tournaments of their own. It's just that we are moving in a way that the money involved, the NIL purse money that is now being involved, like the Players Era tournament, and in those events are pulling those bigger teams away from the Maui, pulling teams away from Battle for Atlantis. Now, hopefully, like at some point, maybe these tournaments will be able to do something similar to bring people back, because just the environment, just the history of these tournaments alone is not going to cut it anymore. The economics are going to drive it all. So hopefully these two tournaments can get back into what we used to see them being, even just a year ago, for what these tournaments were.
I'm in full agreement, full in your boat. A good Maui, a good Battle for Atlantis is good for the game of college basketball.
Yeah. Now, one of the things we also started to see was some of the rankings are starting to come out. Some we're starting to see, I think it was Sam Fetterman, started to put out his top 100, and one of the teams, I think he's just into the 90s right now, but team number 98 was Oregon State, and that is a team that was very much in the mix for a long time as a potential at-large last season. They are going to have pretty much a brand new squad. Oregon State, a lot of people are high on. Not necessarily thinking like the who, but as like how many teams are you thinking about as being top 100 KenPom teams, top 100 net teams in the WCC? Because I think there's a case to be made for there's more than you might think, and there's a case to be made for less than you might think.
Yeah, and I think that's honestly more of a discussion for just how much variance there is in college basketball nowadays. Because you try and go through team 1 through 3, team in the 360s, there's just so much that has changed year over year. Like everything is new. You just mentioned Oregon State. It's basically a whole new team. You still have Josiah Lake, which is great. But at a certain point, it's like the familiarity runs out. And when I think of a number, I'm like, to me, 5 sounds about right, especially by the end of the season, with the potential if certain teams don't figure out their new mixes, like it could downsize to 4. So that's kind of like the region that I'm in. I think 4 to 5 teams, whether it be like, I'm not 100% convinced that Santa Clara finishes in the top 100 this season. Like they have to figure some things out. USF, they also have to figure some things out. It goes without saying with the team we just let off with, Oregon State. All these teams in the WCC bar Gonzaga and St. Mary's. And even then, they have their own challenges. They need to find their way in order to make sure that they're consistently in this top 100 next year, because I don't think it's a foregone conclusion whatsoever.
Because really thinking about this, I mean, two for sure. St. Mary's Gonzaga, they're the two. After that, it does get a little dicier. Now, USF has been in the top 100. I think it's like every year for the last, I want to say it's like 5-6 years. Like they have, well, maybe going back to the pandemic year when they were sub 500, but like every other year, like they are consistent because of that. They win 20 games almost every single year. Santa Clara has been 20 plus wins each of the last, 5 years, like 4 or 5 years. Like this is a Santa Clara has shown that they can be a little bit more consistent. So you probably think that they're going to be in that mix. Oregon State, because considering like if you're on that borderline, that 98, like that's one game, one opponent that you didn't think was going to be as good as you thought, or one opponent that was better than you thought that didn't happen. And that can be the make or break on a top 100. Then we also think about the schedules. Like we started going over non-conference schedules, if that plays a huge factor in what's going to happen with your KenPom ranking and your net ranking. Like, I mean, just looking at it, we know, just looking at the schedules, Pacific, San Diego, we can just write those two off as being top 100. Well, maybe not Pacific schedule, but just knowing of Pacific, they're not going to be a top 100 team. Pepperdine won't be, Portland won't be. But LMU, the schedule, but could they get enough in conference? Yeah, they could. They could sneak into there. Washington State is going to be talented enough to get into there. I mean, if they don't get hurt and banged up like they did this past year, they absolutely would have been in the mix for an at-large. Like that was a team that really was doing a lot of things well if they just didn't have the key injuries, especially you lose a lottery pick in game 6 of the season. That clearly would change your fortunes a lot. So we know that Washington State, if they can stay healthy, is going to be capable. Oregon State's capable. LMU capable. Santa Clara, USF, St. Mary's Gonzaga. I think there's probably about 6 teams that could get in. I honestly think we're probably going to be closer. I would put like an over under at 4.5. And I think right now I would, my heart wants to say 5. My head wants to say 4 when it comes to the number of top 100 teams this year. I just wonder about the early mixes that these teams are going to have to be able to get enough early wins to sustain that success going into WCC play.
And I think the operative word that you just mentioned is capable. So many of these teams are capable, and it's not that neither of us do not believe in USF, Santa Clara, LMU, Oregon State, Washington State. It's not that. It's just that the scope of what these teams can be is far greater than it has been each of these past few seasons. Now, if they get there, and I believe in Chris Gerlison, I believe in Herb Sendek, I think David Riley will be great. They have to show it. I don't think either of us are bullish enough to say, "Yep, pencil them in right now." But at the same time, we still do believe in them to go out and seize their top 100 ranking. They just have to do it, and I think there's a lot more factors at play that say, "Okay, this could be a potential roadblock," as opposed to it's going to be sunshine and roses and 20 plus wins this year.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be doing full reviews on each of these teams, so we'll dive a little bit more deeply into what these rosters are looking like, what these teams are going to be capable of, and the schedules as we start to see, we'll start to match up those, and let's see, like, all right, with the talent that these teams have, with the schedules that they have, what do they have to do to be one of these top 100 teams? What is their ceiling? What is their floor? What is probably realistic with these squads, assuming health? All of it assuming everyone is healthy, which we know is never the case. Someone's going to get banged up. Someone's going to get hurt at some point. Even if they don't miss time, someone tweaks a knee, someone tweaks an ankle, like their back starts to like hurt. It's like all of these tiny things are going to play factors. So as we get closer and closer, 4, 5, 6, maybe WCC teams are going to be top 100 teams. It's going to be competitive one more time in this league. It's in the last year of this configuration. with these squads. It's going to be fascinating to see how many of them can actually break through and be not only tournament quality team, like how many could get to the tournament, how many get to the NIT, and all of that. Now, one of the things we also started to see is award potentials are starting to come out as well. Mid-Major Madness had posted their WCC award prediction, or at least gave Player of the Year and all. And that's the one I kind of want to focus on here. And they went with Paulius Morauskas as their Player of the Year going into this season, which obviously I think is going to be a very popular pick. We saw how well he was able to do in year one with St. Mary's. He is going to be coming into his junior season. A lot is going to be on Morauskas' shoulders, as he is now going to be one of the older players on that squad. I have a list of a few. I wanted to see like who else is on your list of potential players of the year. At least like give me your top three of who you think it could be.
Okay, it's a good thought exercise, and I'm going to put Paulus in there. I'm not going to go one through three yet, but he's going to be definitely one of the three, because I think you can easily see the reasoning for it. Someone who's very versatile on both sides of the basketball for St. Mary's. I think the one thing when you look at him and taking those next steps is don't have those offensive absences. You saw it every now and then where Paulus had, through no fault of his own, really, in my opinion, that he just wouldn't get the ball. He wouldn't contribute offensively. He may still get some rebounds, obviously would still play good defense. But when you look at Player of the Year and what that entails and what's expected of you, Augustus Marciulionis never really went absent in the regular season. You look at Ryan Nembhard, he never went absent in the regular season. Paulius Morauskas cannot go absent. And you think of the other side and the flashiness, Graham Ike. Like there's no reason, there's no ifs, ands, or buts that Graham Ike will be a contender if healthy for WCC Player of the Year. He's going to be the engine that drives the Zags offense. He's going to be the guy, the leader. And I think Mark Few's going to expect that of him to not only be that player that he's been these past few seasons, but be a better leader as well. And channeling his emotions the right way, letting the Zags try and be the WCC champions for one last year, and then eventually go make some noise in the NCAA tournament. So those are the two front runners. And I've been kind of wrestling with three others for that third spot. And I'm going to go between Braden Huff, it's between Elijah Mahi, and it's between Mikey Lewis. I think those are three other guys who can find their way out there. And I think you find the right set of circumstances, I think you're going to find something really well with them. I'd look at Mahi. I think his situation is that his usage will be a lot higher. So therefore, I think he can get, from a numbers perspective, you can find a way to do it. When you look at Mikey Lewis, I think St. Mary's, I would argue, currently does not have their point guard situation fixed yet. And I know you've talked to me about it, and it's just like, that's the one area of pause. We saw Mikey Lewis, even in a game against Gonzaga in the WCC tournament, where offense was basically not even hard to come by, but offense was non-existent. His creation was doing a pretty solid job, considering nobody could hit a three. So I think you can have more building blocks with him. Then you look at Braden Huff. I would argue he could get unlocked being alongside Graham Ike. You have a guy who could score at all three levels, but can he sustain his defense? So I think those are like the five guys. I know I cheated. I'm sorry. But, five guys for three spots, but those definitely two sharpied in with Morauskas, Ike, and I think you could shuffle in any of Lewis, Mahi, or Huff, and I wouldn't be mad at that.
Well, you named all three of the ones I had. So like obviously like Paulius Morauskas, I agree. Like he is going to be one of those contenders. If he can be more consistent on a night in, night out basis, I think that's a huge part to this. To your point, for Player of the Year, you don't get to really have an off night per se. Like there cannot be nights where you just vanish. And that is something that Morauskas is going to have to be better at this year if he is going to be in that conversation. Graham Ike, like honestly, like you can make the case that he has been the best player in the WCC the last couple years. Now, again, like Player of the Year, MVP, however you want to phrase the term, it's like Graham Ike is the most efficient player in the WCC. He is probably the most dominating player in the WCC the last couple of years. And because a lot of teams just do not have an answer for him in the low post. And now, again, to your point of like bringing up Braden Huff, if he and Huff are down there at the same time, it might actually take some of the pressure off of Graham Ike, because now you have a lot of teams who are not going to be able to dedicate as much of the defensive attention on Ike as they might have in the past. My third was actually going to be Braden Huff for almost the exact same reasons. I could just flip. everything I just said about Graham Ike, I'm going to just say about Braden Huff. The only thing I would say there is Braden Huff is a better shooter from the outside. That's the one thing I think that really separates the two of them, that he is going to be able to take guys outside of the perimeter. He can get to the basket. We know he's good back to the basket. He needs to be a little bit more physical on the defensive end. I think that's something true of both. Defense is I think the one key for both Ike and Huff. When you talk about where they can improve, that's where they can both improve going into this season. Now, one name I had that you did not mention, and that is Tyrone Riley. I'm going to bring up Tyrone Riley because, again, based on what we saw a year ago, based on the development it looks like that he has had in the last X number of months since the season ended, this is a USF team that is going to be deeper. This is a USF team that I think, even to your point, is going to challenge St. Mary's and Gonzaga for one of those top two spots. And the biggest part to me is, as Tyrone Riley goes, this team will go. This is where I think he's going to have a massive opportunity to really show out. And if he does develop like some of us think he can, the physical tools are all there. Like, could we see maybe this is an extreme of Jalen Williams sort of jump from year one to year two? Maybe, again, that might be extreme to think about, like a Jalen Williams sort of jump, but he has all the tools. He has the capability. He has the athleticism. He's going to play both ends of the floor. He's going to bring USF a lot. And he would not be my number one on this list, but he is someone that I think is going to be in that mix all year long. So Tyrone Riley, I'm going to throw in a Don into this conversation as well.
Let me throw a second one in there real quick, because it made my mind think a little bit, and you think of the versatility of Tyrone Riley, and you think of the scoring machine that was Ryan Beasley last year towards the end of the season. Like, if he can sustain something like that, and I think Chris Gerlitsen is going to look to him way more, and I think that's expected of Ryan Beasley, and knowing him, he's not going to shy away from that. He's a dark horse. Like, he's a dark horse, and the defensive pest that he is when he gets up all in your grill. There's a chance. There's a chance for Ryan Beasley. If the cards fall where they may, in the right way, Ryan Beasley can make some noise. I don't know if he'll win it, but I think you look at someone like him and you say, there's a world where he can become a microwave and kind of be even a higher level of scorer than Caleb Battle was in a certain sense, because he can be that type of scorer for USF and just take over games. We've seen it in spurts.
I think this is where we might see like something along the lines of, Ryan Beasley you mentioned he is such the microwave. He can be just this explosive player. If USF can break into the top two, and I think it's because Ryan Beasley turned into Jamari Bouye. He turned into I'm going to throw it back. He turned into Anthony Ireland way back in the day. Like he turns into just this because he's so unique because of his size, because of his ability, and he can score inside and out. He can get to the basket. I really like Ryan Beasley. I like him as a sleeper pick. I do think that he is kind of the difference between, say, USF being let's say like a NIT team and a tournament team. He is the difference between those two things. If Ryan Beasley plays at a potential player of the year level, that's a tournament team. If he plays sort of kind of what we've seen and just give him a natural progression, they're on the bubble, I would say. Like, but if he's peak, that team gets in.
I like it. I very much like it. And you saw it at the WCC tournament. Like, he turned his ankle at the Chase Center against Gonzaga, and then you're like, oh, well, we'll see him next year. And then he rocks up to the WCC tournament and just balls out. Like, and then even in the first game of the NIT, like we've seen some of the best of what Ryan Beasley has to offer. And I'm fully in your boat of not only if he realizes, but if USF realizes you give Ryan Beasley the keys to the car, I think you're going to get to where you want to go
especially when you're complimented by a guy like Tyrone Riley.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to follow social media at unofficial WCC pod, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and do all of that. Follow both of us at Post by Zack, at Thomas Dunn 24. Thomas, any last word before we get out of here?
You know, we all thought it would be football news that we'd have to keep tabs on, but here we are, the WCC rolling strong here, late July, early August. Hoops is still in session and forever will be. We got schedules coming up. We got tournaments coming up. It's exciting times.
Football who?
Not here.
Not here. Not here. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we will catch you later.